Why do you have to look up to them, aside from in a topographical sense? Don't you know that a show that big comes at a bigger expense? And can't you see that they're out of control and overzealous? I'm telling you for your own good and not because I'm... So, yeah, Sweden. Huh. Right, Sweden. There. What can I say about Sweden that won't be coloured by my, let's call it infamous point of view and leave it at that? I don't know, they say if you can't say anything nice, either don't say it at all or say it in French. So, hey Lozzie, parlez-vous français?
Hello, bonjour, oui, la Suède. Right, fast facts. Their national broadcaster is SVT.
That's Sveriges Television.
And their head of delegation, that's Christer Björkman. They debuted in 1958 with Alice Babs and Lela Juana, which is the only time they selected their entry internally. Since then, they've used the ever-popular Melody Festival and national selection format to choose their entry, which has brought them no less than 6 victories at the contest. So, Tess, would you mind telling us which one of those was their most successful? I'm sorry, what was that?
It was Loreen 2012.
The lovely people can't hear you, Tess.
It was Loreen in 2012 with Euphoria. At least if I got the number of points, jish! But I will concede, Sweden do seem to have the Eurovision formula down to a fine art. I mean, let's take a quick look at their history with the so-called Eurovision family of events. It's downright unfair.
6 adult Eurovision wins.
11 forays into the junior contest.
Granted, their best placing was 3rd, but still.
1 win and 4 further podium finishes at the Young Dancers.
And a win and a 3rd place at the Young Musicians.
Okay, Sweden, we get it. You do Eurovision. Calm down.
Okay, so we know Sweden doesn't mess around when it comes to Eurovision, but that doesn't mean they're untouchably, flawlessly perfect. They have had some shaky moments over the years. For example, they've come last not once but twice in the adult contest, and one of those was an Ilpois.
Oh!
However, since then, they've clearly turned their luck around, making them living proof that anyone can succeed at the contest if they just put their mind to it.
Even me?
Yes, Sunmu. Even you. Now go improve your grades!
But it isn't all sunshine, roses and golden shoes for our Scandinavian brotherroos. Okay, maybe there were some golden shoes in there somewhere, but this is to say, there is a dark side to the reputation their successes have earned them. As far as the EBU cares, or as any fan can tell, their successes are totally legit, sure. They don't go out and buy votes like some countries have been accused of doing, but, well, for every winner there has to be a 2nd place. And a 3rd place. And so on, and so on.
I think what Tess is trying to say is, other countries are getting jealous of their victories.
But they're not jealous, just underrated, overlooked, thoroughly bamboozled and soundly gibleted of points.
Whatever. But there is a point there. If Sweden keep up their record of critically acclaimed songs and desirable placings in the final, other countries will forever be forced to live in their shadow. And some will inevitably take that better than others.
Like Sweden themselves, for example.
What?
Hear me out here. I have this theory that their result in 2010 broke them once and for all. Since their debut, Sweden have, as of the time of recording, competed in 57 editions of the contest, and appeared in 56 finals. 2010 was the year that broke their lucky streak, and I don't think that went down too well back home, because every entry since then has, with one exception, finished in the top 5. They've been wounded once and have been out for blood ever since. So, they can dish it out, but they can't take it themselves, just saying.
Whoa there, friendo. Hold the phone. Now give the phone to me. Why should Sweden be punished for getting it too right? Surely the onus should be on all the other countries to catch up. So let's help them do that by taking a closer look at just what's going on with Sweden's Eurovision strategy before they run away with the contest for good.
Well, first off, at this point in time, Sweden already hit the ground running in the sense that their reputation precedes them, and in quite a big way. For many fans, Sweden is the gold standard that all other competing countries are scrutinised against, and so, from there, there's already this underlying assumption that they can do no wrong. There's no way that I can word it that won't sound salty coming out of my mouth.
Put simply, in the eyes of the fandom, Sweden have done well before, ergo, they will do well again. And again. Every year. Even the songs they don't end up sending get this treatment. For evidence of that, Look no further than the OGAE Second Chance contest, where Sweden have notched up a total of 15 victories. That's 11 more wins than the second most successful country.
Which is the UK, by the way. So, to say they're a celebrated country would be quite a remarkable understatement, but of course, because of this level of honour lavished upon them, calling them overrated will always elicit a knee-jerk reaction from the majority of the fandom, branding you unreasonable, or a hater, or something equally unpleasant. Funny how no other country gets that level of protection, really, but I digress. Whatever the case, they're currently beaten only by Ireland for number of wins at the actual contest, and with 2 of those coming in the 2010s, they're showing no signs of slowing down, and at other countries' expenses. But I wouldn't make a big display of this without a case study to back it up. There are a few examples that I could talk about, but I'll draw our collective attention to 2016, Franz Jepsen Wall, and If I Was Sorry. Props to him for using the correct subjunctive of the verb, but nobody cares about that. Opinions on the song were divided, to say the least, when it was chosen, and unless my sources are lying to me to feed my apparent bias, he set something of a record low in Melodifestivalen for smallest discrepancy between the percentage of the public vote earned by the winner, i.e. him, and that of second place. But despite that stigma, and despite it very much not being a song for everyone, being relatively stripped back and low on drama and whatnot, it still earned 5th place at the close of the voting. Even when they show signs of weakness, they still hit hard.
And that's just focusing on Sweden when they're at home. More so than nearly any other nationality, Swedish composers are sought after to write songs for other countries, not just nearby, but all across Europe, from Scandinavia to Iberia to the Caucasus, and everywhere in between. See, for instance, Tess's favourite composer of all time, Thomas Gustafsson. Thank you. Or Thomas Gieson for short, it's just easier. At this point, he has always sent at least 1 entry to the contest, sometimes even 2 at once.
They never got 2014. But, well, I could rant about what I think of him all day, all night, and all the following day, at least until lunchtime. I might get tired at that point. The bottom line is, fans both casual and hardcore hold Sweden in high regard because of their history and standard, and celebrate both their songs and their writers accordingly, rightly or wrongly. But it doesn't end there. Beyond just cross-pollinating national finals all over the continent, they have other, subtler ways of reminding you that they have power, and they know how to use it.
Despite how much of a big deal they make out of it each time, it's always just far enough apart that you might not notice. But every time Sweden hosts the contest, they like to make their mark on it in a way, they hope, will persist for at least a few years afterwards.
And once again, this isn't just sour grapes on my part. You know the iconic Eurovision voting system, the whole 1 to 7 thing, then 8 points, 10 points, and of course the legendary catchphrase of 12 points? Yeah, Sweden invented that. Or at least, they were the ones who brought it into the contest for the first time when they hosted in 1975, and let's not talk about why they were hosting the contest in 1975, thank you please.
In 1985, there was that whole incident with the host stress, which showed Europe that the host can be more than just a local commentator. And of course, this particular wardrobe malfunction went down in history for the same reason people remember Bucks Fizz so fondly. It was scandalous or something?
Admittedly, their next hosting in 1992 wasn't quite as significant, but it was sometime around then that televoting was introduced, and Sweden was naturally one of its first adopters. In 1992 itself, I suppose you could make a big deal out of their current head of delegation, Christer Björkman, representing them, who would later go on to co-found the Marcel Besançon Awards 10 years later, after finishing second last. Ha!
At the start of the new millennium, and yes, Sweden had to host the first contest of the 21st century, didn't they? They started the long-running tradition of releasing a compilation album on CD of all that year's competing entries. They also pioneered the earliest version of streaming the contest online, so non-competing countries could still watch. But with the advent of the internet, that was kind of inevitable, but the CD situation has continued to this very day, almost completely unchanged.
And then we come to 2013, and after Lorene's particularly thunderous success the previous year, Sweden's ego was hard and throbbing, so they were ready to meddle even more. It was at this point that they decided to change the voting system just a little bit, so that each country's jury now ranked every competing song in each show, rather than just their top 10, much like the televotes do. Which, okay, that does make the final score calculations a little fairer, but still. This was also the year they changed it so that each show's running order was chosen by hand by a producer instead of by random chance, and even with the provision in place that each song is still randomly drawn into either the first or second half to prevent the producer having total monopoly, this system does still leave something of a bitter taste in the mouth of any country relegated to the farthest reaches of the show's programme. Rest in peace, song number 2. Well, if it's any consolation, 2013 was also the year they tried to introduce a Eurovision anthem to represent every contest ever, and to be performed every year. A song entitled We Write the Story, a glorified post-ABBA track that just served as a further massage to Sweden's self-esteem. Cathartically, Denmark, who would host the 2014 contest, noticed this straight away and the whole procedure died as quickly as it had been conceived. Sure, subsequent years still had their own anthems, but hell, at least they were unique to each edition.
Which brings us up to the very recent past, 2016, and the birth of the newest version of the voting system. Instead of the jury votes and televotes being combined before being added together, they now count as 2 separate scoreboards, basically doubling how many points are available. And again, that is technically more fair, but it still caused a fair bit of controversy when it was introduced.
They also brought in the concept of Eurovision the Party that year, which we had the pleasure of attending, and in fairness, yeah, it was fun, but just to keep Sweden's ego from bubbling over, that didn't turn into the annual event they wanted it to be, but let's not let that distract from the main point here. Sweden very much enjoys making changes to the contest, and a lot of those changes stick. But what does that have to do with the point we're making here? Well, to distill all of this down into a single paragraph, every time Sweden hosts, they scattergun a load of potential changes at the contest, knowing that not all of them will stay, but guaranteeing that at least 1 or 2 ideas will. And when historians look back on the contest, they'll view Sweden as the mighty pioneers that made the contest what it is today, which will, obviously, paint them in a very favourable light.
Lastly, we've been avoiding this topic for a lot more of this video than we really should, but it's time we look at Sweden's rogues gallery of winners, the heroes of their time if you will. ABBA, Hoorays, Carola, Charlotte Nilsson, Loreen and Måns, and why, despite Sweden's reputation, not all of them are still looked upon with equal favour.
From the outside looking in, it might seem like the fandom's love of Sweden embraces all 6 of their winners with the same level of intensity, but if you scratch a little deeper, it quickly becomes apparent that not all Swedes were created equal. That is to say, they seem to naturally sediment into 2 tiers, the big hitting winners that were Waterloo, Euphoria and Heroes, and the also-ran second tier other winners, Diggiloo Diggiley, Fångad en Stormvind, and Take Me to Your Heaven. But what could be so different between them that would cause this divide? Surely it's not just because they have more than 1 word each in their titles. It could be so easy to point the finger and say, well, the less popular ones just so happen to be in Swedish. Okay, well, what about Take Me to Your Heaven? Well, the less popular ones are just older. I hear you. But Waterloo won in 1974, as Sweden's first ever victory. So somehow I don't think we're going to find an answer by looking at what the less popular ones do wrong, so instead let's turn our thinking around. What do the more popular ones do right?
Well, just by being their first ever win, ABBA already start with a bit of an advantage. But what helps even more is that Waterloo was already marketed as mainstream pop of the time, which already gave their performance a heavy foundation of credibility at the contest, almost guaranteeing their victory from the outset, and skyrocketing their career as a result afterwards.
It's something of a similar story with Euphoria and Heroes, with both being in the international charts before the contest started, but with the contest being bigger, bolder and more of a spectacle than it was in the 70s, it was going to take more than international acclaim to set their course for the top of the scoreboard. No indeed, it was going to require world-class presentation of their song too. Because of its popularity and accessibility, Euphoria already started with more than a fair chunk of hype going into the contest, and Loreen's staging as good as sealed the deal in a heartbeat, with what is now considered an iconic performance of fake snow, crab dancing, flashing lights, and whatever else gave that performance its Darren Brown-esque mesmeric flair.
3 years later, Måns took that a step further and brought a tightly choreographed narrative that incorporated the LEDs in the background with the performance in a way that had been done before, but not to this degree. Once again, Europe was left hypnotised by a flashy performance, by an attractive...
Debatably attractive.
Man. So what can we learn from this?
In short, with the leg up that their reputation and pre-contest hype gives them, Sweden's winners get their traction from building up support from across Europe and beyond long before the contest begins, and then, when it does arrive, delivering a modern, contemporary song with a glitzy, mind-frying performance that leaves the audience at their mercy and, most of the time, craving more. So it's all about publicity, marketability, and most crucially, a blast of glamour that can be over the top but doesn't have to be. Whatever suits the song, really. Whatever it takes to dazzle first before anyone can ask any questions. So where does that leave us then? Well, Lozzie and I were discussing our thoughts on the whole thing as we were scripting this very video, and we both came to the same conclusion. So, Lozzie, you work in a school. Care to deliver their grade?
Certainly. We both had very different reasons for this, but we each separately decided that Sweden should get a rank B.
A B?
Yes, Tess, a B. Even though their approach to Eurovision probably deserves something closer to an A, my problem is that they have tunnel vision. They go big or go home with the adult Eurovision, to the detriment and exclusion of everything else. I mean, they've given up on the junior contest entirely, for instance, and they haven't even attempted Choir of the Year. At this point, they almost care more about Melodifestivalen as its own entity than the contest it's supposed to be a tribute to.
I admit, it does feel like all these little changes they keep making to the contest are turning it little by little into an international Melodifestivalen, but the issue that I take with Sweden, and why I'm giving them a B, is the searing smugness that emanates from their strategy. Yes, their enthusiasm and success are enviable in every sense of the word, and it should be good that they're so gung-ho about the contest, but until other countries are able to compete on that level, it's just not fair. It's like if Cristiano Ronaldo played for a local five-a-side pub football team. Much like with Ireland's repeated victories in the 90s, it just gets boring after a while. I want a contest, not a Swedish hit parade featuring a few guest countries. Perhaps that sounds like sour grapes, but you can only hear "and 12 points go to Sweden" so many times before it drives you quite mad.
Okay, Tess, calm down. I think we've made our point. So thanks for watching, and thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being here. Yes, if you want more Lozzie in your life, pop on over to youtube.com/EuropeScalo8, and if you want to keep up with me and watch these videos a month before they reach YouTube, go to patreon.com/TessHex. This video was powered by the lovely people supporting me over there, and in exchange they get all manner of delicious perkery for their dedication. For now though, I have been, and will continue to be, Tessellating Hexagons.
I've been EuropeScalo8.
And we will see you when next we see you. Thanks for watching.